Well, Democratic Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman may be the new brand that Democrats desperately need. Here he is on The View after he was accused of, quote, cozying up to Trump.
There are those on the left who feel like you have made a rightward shift recently, going to Mar-a-Lago, joining Truth Social, your positions on issues like immigration, fracking. What do you say to those who are now, in a sense, questioning your commitment to the Democratic Party?
That's just happened not to be true. I've been on record, too, saying I am not going to become a Republican. You know, although maybe some people might be happy on one side, but I would make a pretty terrible Republican. I can't keep chasing down every last thing that's online because they're just happen not to be true, and just look at my votes. Look at the things that I haven't changed in a way.
He also defended President Trump and the actions that he's taken in the first week of his presidency.
He's been doing essentially what he actually campaigned on early on, immediately after the election. I was like, hey, you know, we have a choice. You know, we can freak out and follow every other thing around, you know, like a cat, you know, with a laser, you know, after everyone. But I'm not that guy. I'm not going to be that Democrat. You know, for me, there's things I'm going to agree with, I'm going to disagree with, but I'm in the business of finding wins for Pennsylvania and for the nation, and engaging the president. I think I see that as doing my job.
Well said.
Cheryl, how refreshing to actually hear from someone that their allegiance is to the American people who they serve.
Well, and that's Pennsylvania. And look at the steel industry, and what we're looking at as a new renaissance for the steel industry under President Donald Trump, not under President Joe Biden, to be clear. So he does know, you know, he knows his audience and he knows who put him into office. But the other thing, too, is that it is refreshing to see somebody that is so opposite of what has happened to the rest of the Democratic Party, which is they've all become a bunch of elite Hollywood-loving snobs. And that's why they've completely divorced themselves from the electorate, and that is why they lost in November. And you know, that party's in disarray. My Democratic friends tell me that. The party's in disarray. There's no clear leadership. They're still they're not even in denial about November. They still don't even know what to say about November because they don't have a response. But Fetterman, I think, you know, we'll see where he goes with his votes.
So when are those stale questions going to dry up, Kennedy? The questions of, well, where's the allegiance to your party? Essentially, where's the rote resistance? Where's the chasing the online, you know, sort of story of the day? Yeah. When will that narrative stop?
Well, I hope it stops soon, because he has to talk to his constituents and figure out why so many of them who were independents and Democrats before, why they voted Republican. And, you know, you have to be curious, especially when you are a public servant. You have to figure out, you know, what is their pain? What is their motivation? And their motivation is, gosh, I hope we can find the biggest cheerleader for the Democrat Party. That's really going to pay the rent. It doesn't. And his party is so incredibly out of touch and in shambles. And therefore, if you're going to do a deep dive and figure out why you're doing what you're doing, you have to start with the people in your home state. And I do have a lot of respect for that. I don't think he's going to be a Republican anytime soon, but I think a Pennsylvania Democrat looks a lot more like a person who's creating a coalition like President Trump is to get reelected.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on what Kennedy's saying, and I really like the idea. So he's curious. And he's asking questions. Do we know yet if he's willing to go to Mar-a-Lago? How much time will he spend with the president? We've heard reports that might happen. But when you look at it, it's that curiosity that's lacking on the left. They lacked it before the election, and they lack it now. They're doing a lot of navel grazing, as I like to say, because they just want to look at themselves and say, we're okay, the kids are okay, and we don't know what the man in the White House is doing. They need to pay attention. With regard to John Fetterman, though, don't get it twisted. He is not a Republican. I don't think he was joking when he said that to the women on The View. I think he means it. By the way, anytime he wants to come and sit on this couch, he can wear shorts all he wants.
Yeah, and he went to Mar-a-Lago, which I think represents, to Harris's point, the Democrats that are saying, we have a commander-in-chief that serves all Americans, and therefore I'm here to serve my constituents too. And last time I checked, there's not something wrong with that.
No, of course not. You know, I'm going to steal a metaphor. Gutfeld uses the metaphor of a pirate ship for the Trump administration, right? Guy even looks like a pirate. You know, you're bringing guys in that normally wouldn't be there, that are at least willing to listen. And, you know, it is analogous to a pirate ship in the fact that it's coming in and it's disrupting, right? He's changed the thing. They have the power. So, of course, he's dealing with the power that is. He's very clever. He's doing the PR in terms of, OK, I'm listening, I'm curious, et cetera. But where the rubber hits the road, he's voting Democrat. So he's having his cake and eating it, too. That's politics. He's revealing himself to, right now, being the shrewdest of the Democrats who are in play.
And the American people, I think, to the point about the mandate, you know, they drew a line in the sand, but they also encouraged that coalition. They encouraged the whole point of common sense, which means getting things done. So a Democrat that works with Republicans on legislation that actually advances a common sense agenda, then that's going to score another win for PA like he's
the energy industry,
amassing.
by the way, the energy industry in Pennsylvania. Look at that. Look at what's going to happen there. And he obviously has a vested interest in making sure that that production happens.
Yeah.
Well, look, the American people have chosen, right? And they had to make a change in choosing, because if you don't change, then you must have picked it.
At least he's recognizing
reality. They didn't want to keep picking the same thing that was broken for them, and he's paying attention to that.
Yeah. Hey, everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.